All right, hello. Welcome to another episode of Diabetes 180. And we are tired. My wife and I, we actually had when did we fly in? A couple hours ago, just got off the plane, basically.
Can't think.
Can't even think how long it's been. It's been a long day, and we're in Holland right now at my brother-in-law's house. So first time here, so we're just really gonna look forward to having some fun. But I did not want to neglect my people, so we're still gonna be meeting tonight, and we're still gonna cover a very important topic. We've been covering animal meats, animal-based foods, and how they increase the risk of chronic diseases. Tonight, we're going to talk about one disease in particular, which is basically what this whole business is about: diabetes. So we're discussing something that isn't discussed enough: how animal-based foods increase your risk of diabetes, right? And so, if you have any questions, definitely let us know in the chat. And Carmen, if you don't mind, just helping me keep an eye on the chat there. Let us know where you're watching from. We can't see everyone as they're watching, so we love to see names and places. So let us know where you are watching from, who you are, so we can greet you as we proceed. So today's live is going to be really simple. Carmen, we're going to talk, was it 3 or 4?
Four.
4 points. 4 points on how, I should say, components, 4 components of animal-based foods that increase their risk for developing diabetes and other chronic illnesses. Jeanette, welcome. All right. Thank you so much for joining us and being always faithful. You want to use your phone to follow?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyone else who wants who needs a greeting, who would love to greet you? I know some people are shy; they don't want to let us know they're watching, but they're there, they're watching, and we love you. So let's go right into it, because I want to make sure that we make time to really make things plain, especially when you're talking about biochemistry, right, Carmen? Sometimes it can get really complicated understanding the chemistry of things, but I think it's important to really understand the whys, because there's so much misinformation, right? Confusion, miseducation when it comes to what causes diabetes. Most people will tell you that carbs are the cause of diabetes, that sugar is the cause of diabetes. But the science, now, that doesn't mean, though, Carmen, that sugar doesn't influence diabetes, right? Obviously, there is a risk of refined sugar and causing I should say, development of diabetes. But by and far, the biggest component of diabetes development is, well, we'll talk about it. I wouldn't say in order, but we're going to talk about the worst part component first, right? Joanne, all right, thanks for watching. Audrey, welcome from Florence, South Carolina, and Jeanette from Cincinnati, Ohio. All right, so where's my presentation tab? All right, here we are. So let's go into it. I'm not in the first. Let me go to the first slide first. All right. So how animal-based foods increase diabetes risk. So this study, I always like to start with this study, Carmen, because it's huge. It's and you can't argue with the numbers, right? You know, a lot of studies, they have maybe a small group samples. It's so cute to see these studies that they boast these big results, and then you look at the study sample and it's like 12 people were evaluated. Like, that could be random, right? 12 people is nothing. This study had over 500,000 people. And it wasn't a short study. A lot of studies are just, a year or less. This study went on for 12 years, right? 12 years, just basically evaluating the risk of meat and diabetes. All right. So what were the results? Robert from Toronto, thanks for joining. All right. I don't think we have actually seen Robert on the show before, right? Yeah, thanks for joining, Robert. So, 500,000 people with 12 years of data should be pretty trustworthy. And the results were pretty consistent through at the end of the study, that the more meat you eat, the more likely you are to develop diabetes. And not only that, by simply, and this is what I like about this by simply replacing even a small amount of meat or animal-based foods in your diet can have huge results in reducing the risk of developing diabetes. So just think about this: just 5%. It says saturated fat, but this saturated fat mainly comes from animal-based foods, right? So if you look at any food source, dietary sources of saturated fat and animal-based foods, meat, dairy, eggs, cheese, fish, oils also are your highest risk, are your highest levels of saturated fat. But replacing just 5% of saturated fat with fructose, and that's means sugar or fructose, reduces your diabetes risk by 28%. That's pretty big.
Yeah.
That's pretty big, by 28%. So how much more can you imagine if you replaced all
of your foods,
or and all meats and all animal-based foods, and replace them with fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and legumes? The results would be huge, right, guys? I mean, it'll be huge. So saturated fat definitely is one of the main components. I would say probably the most component when you're talking about what causes or increases the risk of diabetes. And we're going to go into others, but that's definitely the biggest one. But obviously, Carmen, your time as a patient with diabetes, most of your doctors told you that carbs was a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Did anyone ever talk about reducing meat?
No.
Animal-based foods?
No.
Not one.
It's all about sugar. Don't drink juice. Don't eat ice cream. But it was never about animal foods.
Yeah. And it's very typical. And to me, of course, I'm a PA for anyone who doesn't know. I'm a physician assistant. So I understand you can only give what you're given, and we're not given that knowledge. But when you seek after this knowledge, it is there. And if anyone wants these studies, I usually have the links in the demonstration in the description section. So if you want links to these studies, I'll be happy to give them to you. Just let me know, and I'll give them to you. But the studies are overwhelming.
His head is cut off.
This one.
Like this.
Oh, okay. Our cameraman right there trying to make sure my head is not cut off. All right. So, but the studies are numerous. All right. That's why I like to look at these studies, because it's not just one random study. This is another study in American Diabetes Association showing that increased fat consumption increases insulin requirements in type 1 diabetics. So even those who have type 1 diabetes can benefit from dropping their fat percentage. If you want to increase your sensitivity to insulin. One common theme, actually, Carmen, I should say too, because we're talking about fat still right now, and insulin resistance. Does anyone not know what insulin resistance is? I'm curious. And if you say, I don't know what insulin resistance is, don't be afraid. Don't be shy. I just want to know if it's something that maybe people are not familiar with, insulin resistance. So I know a lot of people have heard of it, and not that you need to know, the science, the details of it, but I'm curious if it's a new term to anybody watching. Jeanette says, I have only had one doctor tell me to avoid animal foods. My endocrinologist. I thought, well, that's a good endocrinologist. I thought she was going to do cartwheels when I told her I'm mostly plant-based. I need to give up the little dairy I eat. Yeah. So that's awesome. And you have an informed endocrinologist. So, I want to say, have you been to endocrinologist before?
I've been to one, yeah.
Just one?
Just one.
Just one, okay. Yeah, because I want to say I might have known another endocrinologist that was kind of aware of the latest studies and science on this too. So I believe if anyone's going to know what endocrinologists should, because they specialize in diabetes, and these studies are out there. But insulin resistance is the main way that fat interrupts, or I should say, disrupts your blood sugar control. Insulin resistance, basically, if you think about insulin, is a hormone that allows sugar to leave the blood and enter the cell. So if your body's resistant to that insulin, a lot of people call insulin the key that unlocks the cell door, right? If your body becomes resistant to insulin, then it becomes a lot harder to get sugar out of the blood. And what really gums up the lock is fat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So being on keto for 4 years, by not eating carbs, your sugars are not going high,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still putting yourself in a state of insulin resistance, right?
Yeah, very good point.
So although it doesn't show in your numbers, you are being resistant from all the fat you're eating day after day, day
Mm-hmm.
after day, which
Yep.
is
And there's two problems with that. I find, like, of course, you could stay on a low carb diet and just not eat carbs, not many carbs. Stay what the keto diets are. Well, how much carbs usually? I forget.
how much it was again?
Limit, because you did it for a while.
Yeah, it was 5%, I think.
5%. Wow, like not much at all, right?
Yeah,
I think it's
5%.
less than.
Just
I
5.
want to say, I'm trying to think of how many grams. Anyone knows how many grams is in a keto diet as far as carbs, daily
Yeah, I don't know
carbs?
the grams,
I forgot.
but I know the
I know you
percentage.
knew it because you practice
I
very
didn't
well.
know the grams
You-
really,
you
but
did
the
it by
percentage, yes.
But it's a very low percentage of carbs that's
Yeah.
allowed in that diet. Of course, your blood sugar is going
20
to
grams,
20.
yes.
I wanted to say 20. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Of course, your blood sugar is going to be controlled. You're not eating,
Yeah.
but the moment you go above that, moment you have 30 or 40 grams of carbs in one day, maybe you slip up and mess up. What happens?
Mhm.
Your blood sugar
It
spikes
spikes.
like crazy,
Mhm.
right? So keto and low carb diets are not reversing the disease or even
No.
controlling it, right? They're masking the symptoms, right? And so, which basically is obvious, because the moment you start to increase your carb intake and start to increase, even if it's healthy carbs like fruits, your body is unresponsive or resistant, right, to insulin and can't manage the carb load.
Mhm.
So, and it's another reason for, I know not all our viewers are diabetic, but if you have high blood pressure, you have high cholesterol, if you're struggling with weight loss, because you're trying to do all you can't lose weight, all these things can be caused by insulin resistance. So it's not just diabetics that suffer insulin resistance. And we know what causes insulin resistance from these studies is the amount of fat in our diet. So this study talks about fatty acid and induced inflammation, insulin resistance in skeletal muscle and liver cells. Another study talks about free fatty acids in obesity and type 2 diabetes, and developing insulin resistance in beta cell dysfunction. The cells of our pancreas that produce insulin become dysfunctional. Another study, I'm just highlighting, we're not going to the details of these studies, but just to show you, there's multiple, this is numerous studies that point to the same thing that causes insulin resistance. That's fat inside of human muscle and liver and pancreas cells. This is an interesting study because it talks about mitochondria, and I'm sure a lot of us know what mitochondria is, the powerhouse of our cells becoming dysfunctional, directly linked to the amount of dietary fat intake, mainly saturated fat. And that also in itself leads to insulin resistance. If you want to summarize, this is probably the one thing you want to take note of, take a picture of, share with others. It is not that fat is bad for you. It's not that, fat is the enemy. It's excess fat stored in the liver, muscle, and pancreas that leads to insulin resistance. And it's very easy, especially if you're focusing on animal proteins and animal-based foods, to have too much fat, as these are the main sources of saturated fat in our diets. So that was just one. We got three. The other three are going to go pretty quick. All right, the other three. So the second component, actually, no, this is actually still the first one. So palmitic acid. Palmitic acid is basically the main saturated fat component found in animal-based foods. So think of palmitic acid as a type of saturated fat found in animal-based foods. And studies show that this saturated fat, another way it damages the body is that it causes leaky gut. It actually damages the epithelium, or basically the barrier between your intestines and your blood. Sounds bad, right?
Yeah.
Anyone ever heard of leaky gut syndrome?
I didn't know it was that serious.
Yeah, yeah. And you've probably heard of leaky gut.
I heard it before, but
gut.
didn't know
the
severity
of it, right? So leaky gut syndrome is something that is directly linked to animal-based food consumption, because palmitic acid, the main saturated fat in animal-based foods, can damage the lining of your intestines. And so to the left in this image, you'll see normal gut, so there's food particles, good bacteria, toxins are remaining in the intestines, right? when the gut on the leak, with the leaky gut on the right side, the spaces between those cells become widened, right? And because of that, now toxins that were supposed to exit the body don't, they go into your blood, right? And these toxins wreak havoc in many ways, causing a wide spectrum of autoimmune disorders. This is a slide that kind of highlights some common autoimmune disorders that have been linked to leaky gut. And how this works, I love talking about this too, because we all know what inflammation is. We all know what autoimmune disorders are. It's basically the body attacking itself, right? Self-destruction. But what causes it? And the best explanation for me is when you talk about friendly fire in war, in times of war, right? Is when soldiers, right, of one side accidentally shoot and kill someone on their same side. And this is exactly what's happening. So your immune system is developing specialized soldiers to take out an enemy. But the problem is that enemy is almost camouflaged to look like your own army, okay, your own body, your own team, right? Yeah. And so after the enemy's done developing a specialized force to destroy this toxin, right, this protein particle, now it starts going after, mistakenly firing upon its own, yeah, right? Because its own has very similar structure. And so this is why many autoimmune disorders can be linked to disruption of our gut lining, which is linked, again, another way that animal products can cause chronic disease. And we all, alopecia, thyroid disease, digestive disorders like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, lupus. Yeah.
So why type 2 diabetes is not on a list?
Good question, because type 2 diabetes is not an autoimmune disorder. Okay. So type 1 diabetes is caused by an autoimmune destruction of the beta cells of the pancreas, right? So where type 2 is not. Type 2 is insulin resistance, purely insulin resistance. Okay, good question. So this is actually truly our second component of animal-based foods that causes damage. So actually leads to development of diabetes. It's the amino acid leucine. So we talked about amino acids last week. Actually, if you missed that, definitely go back and watch it. So people talk about the amino acids that are found in plants, and they say they're inferior to the amino acids found in animal-based foods, because animal-based foods have a complete profile of amino acids. So it is true that animal proteins have higher levels of certain amino acids like leucine, but this can be problematic when you look at the fact that certain amino acids can actually lead to, in excess, it's not, and I always try to remember to say this, it's not that the amino acid is bad, leucine is bad, it's excess, right? The dose makes the poison. The dose makes the poison. And when you look at studies that look at development of diabetes and certain amino acids, leucine has been known to increase risk of developing diabetes. This is another study that compared amino acid mixtures and whey protein. Whey protein happens to be high in leucine in healthy subjects, and the results were that leucine promoted insulin overproduction more than any other amino acid. So this specific amino acid, which is higher in animal foods, can lead to an overstimulation of insulin, which probably you can imagine why that's a problem, right? When you overstimulate something, what happens to the body? Becomes sensitive to it, right? Yeah. Right. It stops listening over time. So that's one that these next three we're going to go through pretty quickly, right? So in these last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we're going to go through pretty quickly. The third one is iron, which is interesting because this is also something that a lot of people say is an advantage for meat eaters. So I don't know. Has anyone heard, and any of my vegans or my vegetarians, have you ever been asked about your iron stores, iron levels?
I've never heard of that.
Really? Okay. Well, a lot of people like to ask it. So yeah, you're probably deficient in iron, or where do you get your iron? People worry so much about you when you're a vegan, but you hear concerns about your health when you're being vegan, right?
Yeah, protein.
Yeah, usually it's protein. Iron is another one that people worry about. But what's interesting, there's two types of iron that come from our diet. There's heme iron and non-heme iron. And I'm gonna keep it simple. Heme iron is basically the iron that comes from animal foods. And because it's more easily digested by the human body, people believe that it makes it advantageous, something that's better than non-heme iron, which is not as well absorbed, found in plants. But what's interesting is when you look at vegans or vegetarians and non-vegetarians, non-vegans, they're saying that there's no problem as far as, I should say, there's no more risk being vegan of being low deficient in iron. Those who are vegan and those who are non-vegan, they both have the same levels of iron deficiencies. I should say it that way, based on whether or not they have heavy menstruation, or they have certain conditions, right? They're at the same level. So if you look at risk of iron deficiency, it's not a problem for those who eat plants pure or on plant-based diets any more than it's a problem for those who eat meat. And that's because our body knows how to absorb and keep what it needs and let the rest out. However, when you have, remember, the dose makes the poison. When you have too much of something, sometimes your body holds on to more than it needs. And this is a problem with heme iron. So if we look further here, dietary iron intake and body iron stores and the risk of type 2 diabetes. In this meta-analysis highlights something very simple. Higher heme iron intake and increased body iron stores were significantly associated with a greater risk of type 2 diabetes. And the way this works basically is because when you have, again, anything, too much of anything is bad for you, right? Mm-hmm. And too much of iron can lead to oxidative stress. Basically, we talk about oxidative stress a lot today. Yeah. My wife got a lot some education. But yeah, iron, too much iron can cause oxidative stress, which leads to damage to very important tissues like the beta cells in our pancreas. And so this is why in this study concluded something very, very important to take note of, that in a study of 185,000 people, as little as 5 milligrams of dietary heme iron intake from animal-based foods a day can elevate a person's risk of type 2 diabetes by 224%. Right. And last, okay, so last point, and I know we're covering a lot. So if you guys, if I've lost anyone, if you want these studies to review yourself, let me know. But of course, this is your time to ask questions as we're going through to the end here. Nitrates and nitrites. I don't know, has anyone ever heard of nitrates or knows what nitrates are? Of course, I'm gonna tell you. There's a hint right here. But nitrates are basically compounds that are added to common meats, deli meats, to prolong their shelf life, essentially make them less likely to go bad. So when you're looking at processed or cured meats, nitrates are added into it to extend their shelf life and keep them from spoiling. Which, of course, you don't want. Who wants to eat spoiled meat, right? Yeah. All right, so no one wants to eat spoiled meat. But the problem is that these compounds, as they develop, as they go through your digestive system, the bacteria in the human body and the immune intestines can convert them to nitrosamine. This is another compound which has been shown to increase the risk of type 1 diabetes in studies. Right. So this is a study that's in World Journal of Diabetes. It talks about nitrate and nitrosamines and in developing type 1 diabetes. And this other study in Finnish children showed a link between nitrate consumption and type 1 diabetes. Now, For those who do know what nitrates are, you might ask, well, then greens or leafy greens, vegetables should cause the same problem because these also have nitrates in them, right? So nitrates are also found in the plant world. But the difference is your body, when you're eating these greens, is eating them along with other micronutrients that are packaged with them. And for whatever reason, they do not convert the nitrate into nitrosamine. It's almost like the package protects it from being converted into a harmful body.
It's not isolated.
Yes, it's not isolated. It's protected from conversion into the more harmful nitrosamine. So eat your greens, no problem, no problem at all. So those are the four components that I wanted to. Yeah, nitrosamine compounds are toxic to beta cells, and beta cells, of course, when they start to become toxic, they start to die off and increase your risk of developing diabetes. So these are four components, but they're not exhaustive. There's other components of animal-based foods, and when we talk about animal-based foods, this last slide is going to highlight why we in Diabetes 180 highly recommend adopting a whole food plant-based diet that limits or eliminates all sources of animal products. Excuse me. So we are actually, I should say this. So my wife and I, we both grew up in Seventh-day Adventists. And 70, well, we still are practicing Seventh-day Adventists. I say like we're not anymore, but being Seventh-day Adventist actually gives you an interesting perspective on diets, because there's a lot of diets in the Adventist church.
Oh yeah,
right. You got everything from the meat eaters; they eat everything, right, except for the unclean. Except for the unclean, they may not eat pork, right? So they try to stick with more of the, more healthier meats. Okay. Then you have Adventists who, might eat just fish. You got some Adventists that eat eggs and milk, and then you got those who skip all that and they're not eating any animal products. So this study,
that group is in too, right? Mm-hmm. That last group
would be what?
The ones that skip everything altogether, because then you have those that eat the processed.
Yeah. So this actually isn't really differentiating between whole food, plant-based, vegan or not. Yeah. But it's interesting that in this study of 60,000 Adventists, 60,903 participants in the Adventist Church with different varying diets and their risk of developing diabetes, the prevalence of diabetes actually increases with the amount of meat they eat, or animal foods they eat, I should say. Because when you say meat, people only think of red meat, but all animal foods. And it's also similar to the body mass index, right? So the body mass index tends to drop with the dropping levels of animal-based foods. So let me make this bigger so I could see it. Let me see. Actually, how do you make the screen larger so I can see it? I think I can see it good enough. Mm-hmm. So so on the farthest left, you got non-vegetarians, those who eat no meat at all, being highest BMI and the highest risk of diabetes. Semi-vegetarians were those who ate meat, I think, don't quote me on this, maybe once a week. And they also had higher risk, but not as much as those who ate all meat all the, multiple times a week. Then you have the pesco-vegetarians, those who just eat fish, and they have less risk, but still higher than those who eliminate fish and all other animal products, but only stick to milk and eggs. But those who had the lowest BMI and diabetes risk were vegans. Those who eliminated animal products and stuck with plant-based foods. So if carbs cause diabetes, then it should be
the other way around.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So this, I'm pretty sure they did an update on the study too. The Adventist Health Study is always doing different studies and updates. So I like to definitely update this slide, but it's very interesting, right? I don't know if this is any news to anybody, but that animal-based foods increase your risk of diabetes. And while it may look like you have short-term benefits in sticking with high protein or animal-based animal-centered diets because your blood sugars look normal now. You look at the studies and it shows a different picture, a more complete picture, I should say, right? That you may be sacrificing your long-term health. Look at our last lives. This will be the final live we'll probably do for a while, at least on animal-based foods, because I try to be very balanced in our topics. We will definitely circle back to this one because this is something that's going to be an ongoing education for people. Next live, I don't think I ever said this to you, but our next live is going to be very practical. We're going to talk about how basically quick and easy meals that you can make on a whole food plant-based diet. Because a lot of us are like, man, I want to be plant-based, but I don't have the time, right? I don't have the energy. I don't know how to cook, or I know how to cook, but don't have the time for it. But I believe firmly that no matter how busy you are, because we are pretty busy people, you can make it work. And we're going to try to help you out with some tips on some quick and easy meals that you can make in 5 minutes or less, and really sticking with a whole food plant-based diet, right? Oh, we have another comment here. So the one thing that has always baffled me is if we are insulin resistant, why do doctors want type 2 diabetics to take insulin? Every time I have tried insulin, I gain weight so easily. It's true. It's because, unfortunately, in medicine, we treat symptoms. We don't treat the disease. The symptom is high blood sugars, and we're going to do all we can to control the blood sugar. We're not worried about the disease itself or the side effects, right? Or long-term results, right? We want to make sure we're managing the symptom. So that has to change. But it's possible when you use lifestyle as medicine, right? And so we always try to give a little freebie. Yeah, and taste good meals. Yes, Audrey. Yeah. I guess that's a suggestion. We don't want we don't want plain meals. We want meals that taste good. That's right. So tune in next week for sure. I'm supposed to turn. So for those who haven't grabbed it already, I know a lot of people already have grabbed their free recipes. Make sure you scan this QR code. It will give you access to over 290 recipes in a PDF file. Actually, I should have pulled up what they look like, but it'll open up an email. Put your email in, and you'll get emailed a PDF file that contains over 290 recipes, all low-fat, whole food, plant-based for your enjoyment. All right. So screenshot that or just scan the QR code now. This video will be available on playback, of course, too, for anyone watching later. One thing I don't say enough also is if these videos are helpful to you, share them with people. Let other people know about this. Don't hoard the information for yourself. The idea is to educate as much people as we can and start to really see a 180 on diabetes worldwide. So help us out and share these videos, right? Beloved, I pray above all things they may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Sorry if we seem a little low energy. It's been a long day.
Thank you.
Yes,
You're welcome.
You